She walked into the grand hearing room with quiet steps, her plain clothes a sharp contrast to the suits and polished shoes of the powerful men seated in front of her. To the world, she was just a simple woman, no title, no fame, no influence. But what no one knew was that in her bag, she carried something that could shake the entire system. As she sat down, the air thick with tension, some of the senators barely hid their smirks. To them, she was harmless, maybe even laughable. A woman like her couldn't possibly matter in a room like this. And so they mocked her, belittled her, questioned her with a tone that made it clear they didn't think she belonged. But they were wrong. What started as a humiliating session meant to silence her quickly turned into something no one in that room expected. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. All it took was one moment, one small move that changed everything. From her bag, she pulled out a single flash drive. At first, it looked ordinary, but the information it held was anything but. With calm hands, she placed it on the table and looked the most powerful man in the room straight in the eye. For the first time, he blinked. This was no longer just a hearing. This was a reckoning. Inside that flash drive was the truth, buried documents, hidden accounts, secret deals. Years of corruption hidden behind polite smiles and public speeches. And now it was all about to come to light. The room that once echoed with confidence was suddenly filled with silence. What would she reveal next? Who would fall? And how did an ordinary woman uncover the secrets of an empire? You're about to find out. Her name was Helena Cruz. Most people had never heard of her before that day. She wasn't a lawyer, a journalist, or an activist. She was a former clerk, just someone who once worked behind the scenes, answering phones, filing paperwork, and pouring coffee in the same government building where she now sat face to face with power. No one thought twice about her back then, but while others ignored her, Helena paid attention. She noticed things most people overlooked. A signature that didn't match, a document that disappeared, a transfer that didn't make sense. It started small, a strange email left open on a senator's computer. A forgotten file tossed in the trash but not shredded. She began to connect the dots. What she found wasn't just a mistake, it was a pattern. Millions of dollars being rerouted through fake companies. Land deals signed under fake names. Contracts awarded to people with no qualifications, except for the right connections. And the deeper she looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't just one person's corruption. It was an entire network, carefully protected, quietly growing. When she tried to speak up back then, no one listened. Some warned her to stop asking questions. Others acted like she was crazy. So she left quietly, but not empty-handed. She started saving files, copying records, building a case piece by piece. She hid the flash drive for months, waiting for the right moment. Now, here she was, in front of the very people who thought they had buried the truth for good. Every eye was on her. Some looked nervous, others angry. But no one was laughing anymore. What exactly was on that drive? Who was involved? And how far were they willing to go to stop her from telling the world? That's what comes next. As the flash drive sat untouched on the table, the room seemed frozen. No one dared to speak first. Behind the cameras and microphones, staffers whispered into phones, unsure of what would happen next. The senators exchanged glances, some confused, others clearly shaken. Helena could see it in their eyes. At least two of them recognized what was coming, and it wasn't just fear, it was panic. They weren't ready for the truth to leave that room. Helena didn't flinch. She'd spent over a year piecing together everything: emails, contracts, recordings. She had names, dates, offshore accounts, and even photographs. This wasn't a rumor or a theory, it was evidence. But she knew bringing it forward came with risk. She wasn't just exposing corruption, she was threatening a system that had survived by keeping people like her small and invisible. Outside the room, a young journalist named Mark had been following Helena's quiet investigation for months. He'd met her once, in a quiet cafe, where she slid him a folder and said, "You'll know when to use it." He hadn't known what to believe then, but now, watching the hearing live, he recognized the truth in her eyes. He grabbed his phone and started writing. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, two of the senators were already on damage control. One made a call to an old contact in media. The other sent a message that simply read, "She can't leave with that drive." They'd survived scandals before. They knew how to bury things, how to twist a story, discredit a voice, buy silence. But this time felt different. This time, the story wasn't just hearsay. It had a face, a voice. And if Elena spoke, the empire they built on lies might finally come crashing down. But she hadn't said a word yet. The head senator finally leaned forward, clearing his throat, trying to regain control of the room. "Miss Cruz," he said, forcing a calm tone, "you've made some serious implications. Do you have proof to back up these claims?" Elena didn't answer right away. She simply looked down at the flash drive, then back up at him, letting the silence speak louder than anything she could say. Cameras zoomed in. Every reporter in the press box held their breath. Viewers watching from home leaned closer to their screens. Mark, the journalist, was already drafting headlines. He wasn't sure how much longer he had before the feed was cut. He noticed something strange too, a shift in the room. One of the aides had disappeared. Security began quietly repositioning themselves. Elena noticed it too. She could feel the change. This wasn't just politics now. It was personal. The system was getting nervous. What no one knew was that Elena had made copies. The flash drive wasn't the only one. One was hidden with a lawyer, another with Mark, and she'd scheduled a timed release if anything happened to her. Still, the risk was real. These men had built careers and fortunes on what that data exposed. She had seen what happened to others who got too close. Whistleblowers discredited, journalists harassed, careers ruined, lives changed forever. One senator leaned over and whispered something to the chairman, who gave a small nod. A motion was made to go into a private session. Cameras would be turned off. Elena had expected that. She stood up slowly, the flash drive still untouched on the table. "I think the public deserves to hear this," she said quietly. But her voice carried. In that moment, the battle lines were clear. Truth against power. One woman against a machine. And everyone was watching what she'd do next. Before the cameras could cut, before the session could be moved behind closed doors, Elena reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something else, her phone. With one swipe, she opened a secure app and tapped a button marked Send. The action took less than a second, but its impact hit like a lightning strike. A backup of the flash drive's contents was now sent to dozens of journalists, independent investigators, and a public archive set to go live in the next hour. Gasps rippled through the room. The chairman's eyes widened. One of the senators slammed his fist on the table. The control they thought they had just vanished. But that wasn't the twist. The real shock came seconds later, when Mark's phone buzzed with a new file, one even Elena hadn't seen. It came from an anonymous source, and it carried a name that changed everything. Senator Dalton. He wasn't just part of the corruption, he'd orchestrated it. For years, he had carefully placed allies in key agencies, manipulated budgets, and rerouted federal contracts to shell companies under his control. It was more than greed, it was strategy. He had been building something far bigger than anyone imagined. Elena didn't know how that file had surfaced or who had sent it. All she knew was that her fight had just become something else entirely. This wasn't just about exposing a handful of crooked deals. It was about uncovering a long-standing empire of power and deception, one that reached far deeper than she had planned for. Now, she wasn't sure who to trust. Even among the people clapping for her, someone might be working to shut it all down. And with the leak now live, she knew the clock had started. There was no turning back, only forward. As the leak exploded across the internet, the hearing room descended into chaos. Phones buzzed non-stop. Screens lit up with headlines breaking in real time. Asterisk massive government scandal uncovered. Secret network exposed *. Journalists began shouting questions. Senators tried to regroup, but the damage was already done. Elena stood still in the storm, watching the empire unravel in front of her. For the first time, the power in a room wasn't with the men behind the microphones. It was with the truth. Senator Dalton tried to speak, but his voice was drowned out by the noise. Mark, now live streaming outside the hearing room, shared the anonymous file that named Dalton as the mastermind. Every detail checked out: years of records, wire transfers, and covert meetings. It wasn't just a scandal, it was a blueprint of betrayal. Elena's story had turned into something far bigger than she ever imagined. But just when it seemed like everything had reached its peak, the final twist hit. One of Elena's former co-workers, a quiet man from the records office, stepped forward. He had been watching the hearings silently, hidden in the back. Now, with a trembling hand, he handed over a second flash drive. "There's more," he whispered. They were planning something even worse. Inside were documents outlining a new scheme still in motion, plans to privatize public infrastructure and funnel billions into foreign accounts. The exposure had come just in time. If Elena had waited another week, it would have been too late. The system wasn't just corrupt, it was still evolving. As security escorted multiple senators out under investigation, and the cameras captured their downfall, Elena finally stepped out into the daylight. She wasn't just the woman with the flash drive anymore. She was the reason the truth couldn't be buried. But someone else had been watching too. And they weren't finished yet. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was massive. Multiple senators resigned. Federal investigations were launched. Major media outlets scrambled to cover every angle of the story, and Elena Cruz became a name known across the country. But she didn't chase the spotlight. She gave a short statement, urging people to keep asking questions, to hold leaders accountable, and then quietly stepped away from public view. She never wanted fame. She just wanted the truth to be seen. Mark's reporting won awards, but more importantly, it sparked real change. Whistleblower protections were strengthened. Government transparency bills were introduced. People who had been afraid to speak before started coming forward with their own stories. Elena's bravery had opened a door that couldn't be shut again. The second flash drive, the one handed over by the records officer, revealed even more than expected. It wasn't just corruption in one circle. It pointed to deeper problems in how public money was handled and who had access to influence. It proved that even simple workers, the ones often overlooked, could hold the most dangerous knowledge. That man, too, remained anonymous, but his action helped stop a major deal that could have cost the public billions. Elena returned to her quiet life, but something had changed in her. She knew the system wasn't fixed overnight, but she also knew silence was no longer an option. What began with one flash drive had turned into a movement. And as the headlines faded and the noise died down, one message remained clear. No matter how big the lie, it only takes one voice to challenge it. Elena was that voice. Not a hero in the traditional sense, just a simple woman who refused to look away. And in the end, that was enough.